we're live. Hey, whoa, hey, hi.
Oh, look, John's bragging about his big hands.
Yeah, man, that wasn't supposed to kick on that early. So I don't know what was up with that. I don't even know if the song finished or not. That was weird. At least I don't think it did. Oh, maybe it did, and I wasn't paying attention. See, that's what I get for not paying attention. When the Streamlab works right for a change. Holy fright.
Right. It's when you don't expect it.
Yeah, exactly. That's always the way it works, is when I don't expect it. I've been fighting with it, and fighting with it, and fighting with it, and now it finally works. But anyway, hey everybody, welcome to the Back to Bits Retro Podcast. I'm John. That's D-Pad Danny. Hi Danny, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I am fine. I am good. We are fine here. How about you?
Indeed.
But no, it totally caught me off guard. I guess I thought that song was longer. That's what I get for actually having everything automated and not paying attention to what I'm doing.
Sure.
But anyway, we're back for our another episode. Ooh, 2 in a row. We're doing.
I know, right?
Yeah, we're doing good.
Track record going for.
All right, that's right. Now we just get one more in. Yeah, it would be good. But so we thought this week we're going to do things a little different on the. There's only one little thing of news, and it's more just a PSA that I found that I thought was kind of interesting. But we're going to kind of do more of taking questions from our Twitter, and also there was a little topic thing that Danny thought would be an interesting thing to talk about too. So it's more or less just a little chatty thing this time around. Yeah. Not really a whole lot of news or anything like that, of course.
This week.
But we'll start off like we always do with any new pickups, which I know Danny has a new pickup because I picked it up for him.
Well, why don't you go first this time? You've let me go first the last couple times. Well, let's hear what you got first.
Okay, well, the first thing... Well, I need to pull up the picture of it because I don't even remember how many were on it. A couple weeks ago... Well, I say a couple of weeks ago, it's probably more like December now, or before the new year. A Sega CD lot with a system and a bunch of games popped up locally on the Facebook group here in the area, and I never see Sega CD games around here. There's two things I never see: Sega CD, and I never see Saturn games. Very, very rarely. I actually see more Saturn than I do Sega CD most of the time, but. I really didn't need another Model 2 Sega CD system. I already have a Model 2 and a Model 1. Mm-hmm. Even though my Model 2 is I patched it. I may have talked about it before on here. I got it several years ago when we lived down in North Carolina. I had a blown fuse on the bottom of it. So I had to wire a new fuse up in it because it's one of those ones that were soldered to the board. But anyway, I mean, it works fine. No issues whatsoever. But the thing about... Hey, old Ronan, how's it going? Thanks for hanging out with us in the chat. I messaged the guy and said, look, I really don't need the CD system. I just want the games, And I was like, he had Sonic CD, Tomcat Alley, Corpse Killer, Rise of the Dragon, The Amazing Spider-Man. Those were all complete in case with books. Lethal Enforcers 2, and he had a loose copy of Batman Returns, which I figured probably most people have a loose copy of Batman Returns because it was a cardboard box that it came in. So, and he was like, "Sure, I'll sell them separately. Shoot me an offer." So I shot him $40, just like, let's see if he takes $40, and he took it. So,
can't beat that.
No, so I met him the next day and got those games. A lot of those games I had not played. I had played Batman. I had played Amazing Spider-Man. I'd never played Sonic CD on the Sega CD, and it's actually a pretty good Sonic game.
Yeah, it's pretty decent.
Yeah, it's not bad. Lethal Enforcers, I don't have a light gun. I have a Menacer gun, but I don't have I've lost my box somewhere. It's somewhere at Mom's in a box somewhere, the receiver box. Sure. I have the gun, but I don't in the actual box for the Menacer, but I don't have the.
So it's completely useless.
Yeah, it's completely useless. But I know at one point I saw the receiver box at Mom's, but I didn't know where the gun was at. So I don't know. I'll find it one of these days when I'm going through and cleaning everything out when we getting stuff ready for yard sales and things. But Corpse Killer's a kooky game. It makes me laugh.
Yeah, that one's really campy, if I remember correctly.
Well, most of those, it's a FMV game, so most of those FMV games were a little crazy. The Tomcat Alley is just hard. I don't understand it.
Shoot the tubes, dog meat.
Yeah, it's like, and then immediately I died when it was like, I don't know what I'm doing, so I just set it on the shelf. The one that I was really interested in, though, of course, was Batman. I remember renting Batman Returns when I was a kid, when I would rent a CD unit from the rental store here. It's got driving as well as platforming. When I was a kid, I'd never remember getting to the platforming part of the game. It was always just the driving. Right. Actually, I realized I could switch it and play both, or I can, in the menu options, you can turn off the driving and do only the platforming, so you can play the platforming game. Because I tell you what, the driving levels like never end. It doesn't seem like. I mean, it just keeps going and going and going. Not that it's a bad thing. It's pretty cool. I have a copy of The Adventures of Batman and Robin on Sega CD. I don't think there's any platforming with it. I think it's just a straight driving shooting game. Like
that one's straight up driving.
Yeah, which is cool too.
Right.
But it's kind of the same game with just the anime skin on it instead of, the whatever live action, whatever you want to say.
Sure.
Yeah. Old Runnin says, the only CD I have is the Sega CDX, although I may pick up another one when the Analog Mega SG releases. Yeah, I haven't done much collecting for the Sega CD either because they're so hard to find, at least around here. And I'm not one to go to comic. I'm not one to go to stores usually and buy games because we really don't have. There's one store here, and they don't have a lot of Sega CD games either. But the couple that they had are actually decent priced, so. But I never got a CDX. Actually, a buddy, an acquaintance that I've bought some games off of was actually selling off his collection, and he had a CDX that was broken, and he was selling it for like $50. And by the time I saw the listing, he'd already sold it. I was like, oh man, if you'd let me know, and I would have took it, and just to have it. Yeah, but that's fine. I mean, it happens. Like you said this afternoon, you can't get them all. But the one that I was most surprised with that I actually like a lot is at Rise of the Dragon. That game is really
good.
Cool. Yeah, and it's really not that expensive of a game anyway. Not like Snatcher. It's like I think
$25 maybe. CIB
something like that. Yeah, it's not that much, but man, it's a lot like I call it a poor man Snatcher. But it's a strange, unusual game. But man, it is cool, and I like that cyberpunk. Picky, it's really point and click more than it is, anything else. But I really like it. I need to get into it more.
The cool thing about that also is that the main character is voiced by the guy who played Leonardo in the original Ninja Turtle cartoon.
Yeah.
So that's kind of neat too.
Yeah, that is cool. I forgot you'd said that. Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's funny when you really start looking into voice actors, you see all the things they did, cartoons and games and movies and stuff like that you never knew when you were a kid because you just didn't know any better. Unless they didn't change their voice and they just sounded like them, then you're like, hey, that sounds like so-and-so. The other lot that I got was actually this past week. There was a dude on the Facebook group who posted a bunch of games, and they were in rough shape, NES games. And one of them was Bucky O'Hare. And I knew Danny wanted a copy of Bucky O'Hare. So I'd sent him a picture of the game, what it looked like, and I said, do you want me to ask this guy if he'll just sell this game, even though looks in rough shape? And these games were clearly stored somewhere where it was hot and humid, and they were stored there for a very long time.
Absolutely. For those of you watching, you can take a look at it here.
Oh, good, you got it there. Yeah, I mean, that thing is all those
blistery goodness.
Yeah, and all those white blotches, are just the plastic, the coating on the plastic that's bubbled up. I've tried to clean it. I try to do everything I can. I mean, it's been sanitized. But the chips inside are fine. They all work. There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. There were 17 games. 3 of them was Mario and Duck Hunt. But,
Go
you know,
figure.
the rest of them was Castlevania 2, Bubble Bobble, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, 2 copies of Dino Wars, Cobra Triangle, Paperboy, Dr. Mario, NES Football, and that Bucky O'Hare. And I really didn't want all the other games, but I asked the guy how much he would take if he would take $15 for the Bucky game, and he was like, sure. And I was like, okay, $15 for Bucky O'Hare, hot dang.
Yeah, I told you straight up that even if it doesn't work, I will give you the $15 for taking the chance. It was worth it to me.
Oh yeah, and I had all the faith in the world that I could get that thing to work, and even if it looked like a train wreck on the outside. Right. And that's the thing, on the outside they look like train wrecks. On the inside they are not that bad. I mean, there was carbon buildup, you know, there was your normal thing. There may be a spot or two of corrosion on some of the chips, but nothing that hindered the workings of them.
Right.
And he lived, man, I don't know if I told you the whole story. He lived out in the middle of nowhere.
You mentioned that.
He literally lived in the middle of this county. And when I say he lives in the middle of this county, that is literally the middle of nowhere. The place that I met him at first, he didn't have a ride, which happens a lot around here. It's a lot of guys who don't have driver's license and don't have cars, yet they want to sell something. So it's like, well, how do you get to this or that? So it's like, he was originally going to meet me at the gas station in the little town called Leon down the road, which is about a half-hour drive. Well, he couldn't get anybody to give him a ride there, and I said, well, where is your house? He actually lived in an old post office.
Oh, wow.
And it had no address. He was like,
that's ironic.
He was like, I live in the old such and such post office. Do you know where that's at? No, I do not know where that's at. I said, you need to give me an address. I said, if I don't have an address, I don't know where it's at. And so we talked and went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And finally, he got me on the road that he lived. I got figured out where the road was that he lived off of. But I still didn't know how to get to where he was at. So I said, there's a church on this road. Are you within walking distance of this church? He was like, yeah. I was like, I will meet you at this church. And it's a little, and when I say a church, it's a little tiny country church with it looked like it just had maybe 2 classrooms and a sanctuary, and that was it. And it was 10 minutes off the road where the gas station was at. So I went back up, lost cell service, and just sitting there waiting. Here he walks up with a bag with all these games in it, and I'm like, hey, here's your $30, because he ended up saying he wanted rid of all those games, and he'd take $30 to get rid of them. So I said, okay, I'll bring an extra $15 and take them off your hands. But I mean, it's crazy. But when you live in a very rural community, this is what happens a lot of times. I can't tell you how many times that I have made deals and met people, and it's ended up being out in the country. I do carry a gun with me when I go out there, just for safety's sake, because you never know. I mean, you
get out there, you start hearing banjos.
Oh
and
yeah,
stuff.
I mean, it's nothing but farms, and like the closest person is like 2 or 3 miles down the road. Nobody really lives close together. But there was one time. I met a girl. Me and the wife met a girl to pick up the Sega Master System I had, and she gave me the address, and we were driving. I'm like, where is this? I don't see the address. Is this old trailer that's got no windows in it and anything like that? But there's a house across the street, a driveway that goes up to a house across the street. We pulled in that driveway, and I went, well, this can't be it. I said, I think this is a bust. Started to back away, and she climbs out of the window of that trailer with no shoes on. With the Master System with a bunch of games in a box. It's like, here, we were cleaning out this trailer. Here, it's like $20. Here you go. Thanks. All right. Walk back across the no shoes on, jump through that window again. It was like, what? Hey, thanks for hanging out, Ronan. Appreciate it.
Yeah, take care.
It was like, what is going on? But that's the norm around here.
Sure.
I have tons of stories where I've had to meet people like that. So it sounds, if it was anywhere else, you would swear it was fake and they were just going to knock you out and take your money, But
but it's just the typical thing
it's
there.
The typical thing here. You know, when you live out in the live in a very rural community that's very country. That's just the way it is. But hey, you know what? I'll take 17 games for $30, and one of them was Bucky O'Hare, and
yep. I'll take that all day.
Yeah. So I cleaned that up, sent it to you. I've cleaned these other ones up, my buddy. I think I kept 6 or 7 of them because I didn't have like Dr. Mario. I didn't have Dino Wares. I didn't have a couple of the other ones, but I went ahead and kept them anyway, just to have.
Sure.
But they all look like that. I mean, I don't have it within reaching distance, but well, actually I do. The Bubble Bobble. I gotta put my headset back on. The Bubble Bobble and the Simon's Quest are so white. See the difference in the... For you live listeners, or live watchers, you could see the difference in the whiteness on the front of it. But I mean, look at that label. That label is fine, full of color, looks good. But that whole outside of this is just stained white, bleached out white. But it works. It works perfectly. You put it in, and it boots right up immediately.
Yeah, same with the Bucky. I mean, I put it in, it booted with no issues, and I was very happy to play it.
Yeah, some of the worst heat damage I've ever seen to a game. I mean, it's just unbelievable. But you know what? I don't care. As long as the cartridge works, and that's the way my other buddy is too. He's like, you know what? I don't care what it looks like. He's not in it for the value. He's just in it for the games too. So it's like, perfect. Here you go. I've got a big batch of them for you, really cheap. You know, it's like, but it's unbelievable. So other than Bucky, you got anything else?
Well, that was the big one. Thanks for stealing my thunder there,
sorry. That story kind of had to lead right into that. There was no way around that.
But yeah, I mean, $15 for a Bucky. Like I said, I don't care what it looks like if it works. I mean, I've gotten a lot of higher end titles that have imperfections. Like my Panic Restaurant has a peeled and re-glued label. My Wacky Races has water damage on the top label. If it means cutting off some of the cost, especially as much of a significant cost as $120 versus $15.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's a no-brainer for me.
Well, and I mean, even me and you talked. It's like you could always, if you wanted it to look nice on your shelf, you could always swap the shell and put a repo label on it and keep that shell.
Right, in case I trade up and sell it out or whatever. And, maybe even if you would sell it, maybe that person that would buy it would rather have the repo and the original than they would anyway. So Absolutely. It's something I might consider, but I don't know. It's got character. It's got a story behind it in its current state.
It's quite a story. I should have videotaped the whole thing so everybody could see, because it would blow your mind. It would have. And I went by myself this time because my wife was working, and she was like, I can't believe that you went out there by yourself. I'm like,
it was for a Bucky.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, that's what I told her. I said, it's for Bucky. I said, I can't sit around and wait all day. You
can't pass that up when it comes around.
Yeah. But anyway.
Otherwise, like I said last time, I've been working on my Sega Saturn collection a little bit. I haven't gotten a bunch of pickups this time around because, again, Sega Saturn's expensive to collect for.
Yeah.
And, but this time around, I got Virtual Hydlide, which runs at an astounding 3 frames per second at best. Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, it's fancy. It's cutting edge there.
I didn't realize that game ran that bad on the system.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, look up a YouTube video, or somebody did a speed run at the most recent AGDQ, and it was pretty comical. But yeah, it's for those of you who don't know, it's basically a remake of the first Hydlide, but in stunning 3D, and it's got randomly generated worlds, and you can punch in a code to get back to the world that you created before, or you can have it randomly generate one. It's got all the same focal points, but everything's in a different area. It's something. It is definitely a sight to behold. I suggest you guys all look it up, Virtual Hydlide, just to see. I'm not exaggerating when I say like 3 frames per second. It's pretty. Crazy. It's pretty terrible.
Is it a cheap game or?
I think that one cost me about 35 CIB.
Really? Wow. Yeah. Oh, well, that's complete in box. Okay. Well, 35 complete in box. Okay. I mean,
it's not terrible, especially when you consider it's a Saturn game.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say. It's Dexter Hey, Dexter, what's going on, man? He says, oh, neat. It's old Atlas.
It is. It's made by Atlas. Yeah. It's not their best effort, though.
Well, and that's probably why it's $35. If it had been anybody else, it probably would be a $15 game. But since Atlas's name is on it, it probably adds a little more money to it.
It's possible, and it's just one of those titles that really, like you and I had talked about before, it's one of those that really showcases that the Saturn was not meant for 3D. It was not meant to be a 3D console.
Yeah.
But on the other side, a very visually appealing game that I got, I also picked up Rayman for the Sega Saturn.
I hear that's a very good game.
It's a very difficult game, but it's very pretty. Lots of colors, good sprite work and everything, good music. But man, I remember playing a demo for the PC when I was younger, and I did not realize how hard that game is. I thought, oh, well, I was a kid, I couldn't play it past the first level, whatever. I couldn't get past the second level as an adult.
Oh, jeez.
I'll probably go back to it and try it some more, but man, it's got some serious difficulty level to it. It's no slouch.
Yeah.
I mean, it's cool. It's a very visually appealing game, and I'd like to get further in it, but
I don't think I've ever played it on the Saturn. There's a lot of games I never really played on the Saturn, just because I didn't have them, and we would rent it, but. You'd only be able to rent one game, and what usually ended up happening was you'd rent one game, and you'd be like, "Oh, I really like this game," and then when you go back, you wouldn't rent something different. You'd rent that stupid game again because you were 14. Well, I guess at that time I was 17 years old, so you're like, "Oh, well, I'll just play what I can play. I know what to play and get my money."
Like I know I like this one. All those other ones could be crap.
Get my $25 rental fee for the weekend out of it, or however much it was at the time. I remember Sega CDs were $25. I don't remember what Saturns were. They were probably a little more than that for the weekend. But none of us had Sega Saturns. We all had PlayStations because they were way cheaper.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's certain games with the Sega Saturn when you play them, you're like, this system was not meant to play this kind of game.
Absolutely. And Virtual Hydlide is a shining example of that.
Yeah, I mean, 2D on their games look awesome.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, but some 3D games...
mostly beautiful. Depends on the developer and, other variables, but the potential is definitely there.
Yeah, and you could see Sega first-party 3D games on the Saturn were way better than 3D games from usually third-party people most of the time. Sega sometimes had crappy ones on there too, but that's usually the way it is with every system. I mean, you look at PlayStation 4 now, most of your first-party games are tremendous and beautiful and look really good, and not that your third-party games don't, but sometimes there's a difference in quality with them just because, the developers don't always get 100% out of the system, where first-party developers who had hands in making the hardware,
they know exactly what it's capable of.
Know what it's capable of and can push it to its limits. So, but yeah, that's cool. I don't think I even know that Hydlide was on the Sega Saturn, or if I did, it was one of those games that I went, this looks terrible, and just went on and forgot about it.
There are 3 U.S. release Hydlide games. There's Hydlide for the NES, which is probably the one most everyone is familiar with. Then there's Super Hydlide, which you would think would be for Super Nintendo, but no, it's for the Genesis.
That's the one I have, and that's the one I'm most familiar with, is that one.
Right, and then there's Virtual Hydlide, which again is essentially a remake of the first one, but some more bells and whistles, some more bosses and stuff, and far less frames of animation.
Yeah, so that's cool though. I mean, it's at this point, any Saturn game that you can get any Saturn game you can get is great.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fun system to collect for.
Yeah, it is. It's really fun to collect for, and like I said, if you want money, it's definitely not the system to collect for. But let's get into the news real quick before we get into the main topics. Literally, the only reason I put this in here is because I thought it was hilarious. There is actually a Chinese knockoff of the OSSC. It's on AliExpress. There'll be a link in the show notes for it. This thing looks exactly like the U.S. or European, I can't remember. I think it's made in Europe. Or the company in Europe that created it. Looks exactly like the OSSC that they have that they sell for, I want to say it's around $220 or $250, something like that. On AliExpress, the one that I'm showing right now, yours shows it's not in stock. Mine shows it is. So who knows?
Gotta love that consistency.
Yeah, for $170. I think when I first saw this, it was $149. It was cheaper than that, but things fluctuate on AliExpress all the time.
Sure.
Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, John, the OSSC is an open source scan converter. That's what it stands for. It's open source, so anybody can make one. Well, this is true, but this is a straight up exactly like what you could buy in every way, shape, or form. I mean, it is literally, and it's probably, if I had to guess, it's probably coming out of the same factory that the OSSC or OSSC is that you buy from the actual developers who created it.
It's possible. It looks very much copy and paste.
Yeah, I mean, it has the remote, it has the, it has the same shell, same everything. So if you're in the market for one that's a little lower priced, you
they
can try
may
it
or may
out.
not be.
Yeah, I have no idea about the quality of them. I don't know anybody who's bought one. I just happened to see this on one of the Facebook groups I'm a member of, and everybody was like, holy crap, this is the first time we've ever seen a knockoff of it, which it's been out for well over a year, so it's about time for those Chinese knockoffs to start rolling out. But yeah, it's like, who knows, and when you're on AliExpress, one day it may be $170, the next day it may be $120. It may be $140 the next day. So, if you're interested, go to the site. It'll be in the show notes with a link, and you can add it to your watch list or whatever. And, when it gets down to a certain price that you're comfortable with. But that thing does SCART. So, that's the one thing that the, like the RetroTink doesn't do. But the OSSC doesn't do S-Video, I think, or Composite. I don't remember which one of those that they don't do. I'd have to look at it again. But it's... Hey, if you're looking to cut cost and try to do something affordable, I mean, that's cheaper than
maybe an alternate route.
Yeah, I mean, I don't always say go Chinese knockoff, but sometimes you have to go Chinese knockoff because it's, and not like I said, 90% of the time the Chinese knockoff is as good as the regular because it comes out of the exact same factory. So who knows though, but something to keep an eye on. Anyway, main topics. One thing that Danny brought up, he wanted to know, what overrated games or game do you remember to be great, but in playing it as an adult, you realized it is not as good? I don't know. I'd have to think about it. I'm sure you've already got one in your head.
And these are totally my opinion. Some people maybe get on the soapbox. No, what are you talking about? I love that game. It's still just as good as it was 30 years ago. But there's some games that I think are only as popular as they are, not because they're good, but because everyone remembers them.
Right.
And in everyone remembering them, they kind of trick themselves into thinking that it was a good game just because, hey, you remember that game? Oh, yeah, I remember that game. Oh, yeah, it was great. A perfect example, and again, I know I may get a little flack from this, is Skate or Die. I'm sorry, Skate or Die is not a good game. It is not aged well, and it is just not fun. But man, you mention that to anybody. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you mention it to anybody. Oh, yeah, I love Skate or Die. I used to play that all the time. Yeah, it's not a good game. Yeah. I'm sorry. It's not a good game.
I remember playing it at a friend's house, and Skate or Die was one of the games that was in that lot of games that I kept. I cleaned it, popped it in, and I couldn't get the skater to move out of the front door. And I went, why is this not... I'm pointing down. Well, let me point up. Oh, he went in the store. Why can't I got to point left to make him go down? What? Yeah. I don't remember this.
It's got a weird, almost tank controls sort of control scheme to it. It's bizarre, but yeah,
so weird.
I don't think it's that good. I think the most novel thing about that game is the fact that you have the punk Rodney Dangerfield in the skate shop.
Yeah.
And that's about all that the game has going for it. Otherwise, it's just, again, it's one of those that everyone remembers, and they mistakenly think that it was good, and it's just I just don't think it is.
I think one off the top of my head that I played as a kid and thought was great was Altered Beast. That game, when that game was bundled with the Genesis that I got, and because I got the Genesis for my birthday the first year it was out. I didn't get it. I didn't get it that Christmas that it came out. I got it a couple months later for my birthday in February, and that was the one that was bundled with Altered Beast. And I remember sitting there playing it with a buddy, going, "Man, this game looks exactly like the arcade. It's tremendous. It's awesome. It's great. I love it." And when I started collecting again and got it back, I immediately popped it in and went, "Man, I love Altered Beast. It's going to be, wait, all I'm doing is just moving. I wouldn't even call it a beat 'em up. I mean, you just walk up and literally
it's like a forced scrolling beat 'em up.
Yeah, it's like, wait a minute, this game isn't as, I think it was just, I came from the arcades to home.
Sure.
And it was like, ooh, this is like what we played in the arcades, and technically it is, but it's not. I mean, it's which the arcade game, now looking back on it's really not that great. It's like, it's a beat 'em up, but it's not a beat 'em up. Not when you compare it to Streets of Rage or
or like Final Fight or something, a true beat 'em up.
Well, or even Golden Axe. I mean, it's at least Golden Axe, you got depth. You're moving around. This one, you're literally just punching and kicking to the right. No, you could jump every once in a while, but you could pretty much go through that whole game without jumping if you didn't if you didn't really want to. Sure. I don't know. I think that's a game that holds a lot of nostalgia for people, and it's maybe not a bad game, but it's not as good as you remember it anyway. It's very mediocre.
It's funny you should mention that one, because I didn't have a lot of Sega games growing up. Like I mentioned before, I'm mostly Nintendo, and we got a Sega Genesis at one point, but I think we had like 3 games for it, maybe. So I didn't even really play that one. I was aware of it, and I knew that a lot of people liked it. And then, once I started collecting for other consoles, I got a copy, and I was like, okay, well, this is okay. I could see the appeal. And then as an adult, I'm like looking around on forums and stuff, and everyone's talking about how bad it is, and I'm like, wait a minute. Everyone said this was a good game. I thought this was a good game. I don't have the nostalgia for it, so I mean,
well, that's it. It's nostalgia. I mean, that's exactly what it is nostalgia.
I thought it was okay, but I mean, again, I don't have it held up on a pedestal. I was able to see it for what it was. I didn't go in thinking, oh, this is the best game I remember.
Yeah, I mean, no, this was the first. That was I think the only games, if I remember right, I only had 2 games when I got the Genesis for my birthday that year, which I guess it was February of '90, because it came out in November of '89, I think, if I remember right, or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
But the only other game I had was Revenge of Shinobi, which I don't think there was an arcade version of Revenge of Shinobi. There was of Shadows of Shinobi, but there wasn't of Revenge. And I thought, Revenge was great, and I still love to play Revenge to this day.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
But Altered Beast, we just were blown away by it, and it was just like, arcade at home. This looks just like the arcade. Of course, it really didn't. I mean, it did, but it didn't look like it to the extent of arcade at home like we thought it did. But yeah, I mean, to me, that game just doesn't hold up in my brain. After going back and playing it now, it just doesn't hold up. It seems corny, and it sounds terrible. Yeah, I mean, it just sounds horrible. I'm just trying to think of another game that I actually have. That's why I keep looking back. That I remember playing as a kid, and I really didn't.
I can throw another one out there.
Go ahead.
This is another one that I feel like falls into that same category. Everybody remembers and mistakes it for it being a good game, and that is Paperboy. I find absolutely no enjoyment in Paperboy, like at all. I guess I can see the appeal, but it's like, unless you're fantastic at Paperboy, you just don't enjoy it. No. And it's a very steep learning curve. It's very hard to get good at Paperboy, I feel.
Yeah, I agree. I played. That was another one that I got, and I'm still pretty good at Paperboy. But man, I never get past the first level anymore, because even though things are dodging out and I know they're going to dodge out, it's like I can't.
your movement from side to side is virtually non-existent. It's speed up or slow down. That's the game's answer to avoid stuff.
Yeah, and you can never slow down quick enough, unless you come to a complete stop. I enjoy Paperboy Spinner. I mean, but it's not. I don't think it's as good as everybody holds it up to be. This is a classic, a must own for the NES. I don't think so. I just got it the other day, and I've had an NES for 20 years.
And again, this is strictly our opinion. Like I said, I'm going to get some flack for some of these, but it's just they're just games I don't find appealing.
One of the games. And this one I know everybody's going to hate, but me and you have about the same. I don't know if it's. I remember playing Final Fantasy VII as a kid and thinking it was. Well, I say as a kid. I was a young adult. I was 18, 19 years old when it came out. I remember being very fascinated with it because it was unlike any role-playing game that I had played before since I was playing Phantasy Star and Final Fantasy on the NES and the Super NES, and then to get a 3D thing. But Final Fantasy VII to me is not as good as everybody holds it up to be. But that's just me. The game I think is very overrated. I'm not going to say it's a bad game.
No, it's a good game, but it's not the masterpiece that people say it is.
No, I agree. I don't think it is at all. And when they brought it out on PC, I bought it on PC thinking, okay, I'm going to play it again, and this will run a little smoother on PC, and it'll look a little better. It wasn't like an HD upgrade or anything, but it might look a little better. But it's not, you're not that great. No, Spinner, we're just talking about games that we played when we were kids that we thought were great, and then go back and play them as adults and realize that it's not as great as we remember them being.
Yeah. And as far as Final Fantasy VII goes, I didn't have a PlayStation when it was new. I didn't have a PS1 until PS3 was almost out. I asked my parents one year, hey, you want to get me something for my birthday? I was a teenager. I don't remember how old I was, probably 17 or 18. I was like, you want to get me something for my birthday? Get me a PS1. They're like, you mean a PlayStation 2? I was like, no. I'll save you some money. Get me a PS1. Get me Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy Tactics, because I missed out on a ton of RPGs. And I remember Final Fantasy VII when it came out. It was just this shiny golden RPG that everyone else had, but I didn't.
Right.
And by the time I finally played it, it was like I was so far behind. I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. The music's amazing, which the music is still fantastic.
Yeah, it is.
And the novelty of it being 3D at the time and stuff. But my big hang up with 7 is, again, it's a good game. I'm not going to say it's a bad game.
Oh, I'm not either.
Here saying it's a bad game.
No.
It's a good game. But it's so long. And it's not even... If it was long and had volume to it and had, you felt like you were getting something done, but it drags on simply for the sake of using it as an advertising point. Because you remember when it came out, it's, up to 150 hours of gameplay if you get it. That's great, but there's so many lulls in the storyline where it's just fluff.
Yeah.
It's just filler.
It has and I always get fluff.
Right, and every time I sit down and I'm like, I'm going to beat this. I'm finally going to do it this time, which has been quite a few times, by the way. Yeah. I get, at most, halfway through the second disc, and I just stop caring. I tried starting it again not long ago, and I'm not even halfway through the first disc, and I decided I had to come to grips with it. I had to come to terms and say, you know what? I'm going to take it off of my back burner list indefinitely, because I don't think it's a game I'm ever going to be able to sit through the whole thing. Yeah. And I'm at a point in my life where I can totally be okay with that. Yeah. I can appreciate it for what it is, but it's just not for me.
Yeah. Oh, I totally appreciate what it is. It's that meshing of kind of your 16-bit, 32-bit. It's a transition game, I think. It's a transition into modern-day role-playing games, what they are now, Japanese RPGs. I thought 8 was a much better game and a much better story than 7 was. I enjoyed 8 more than I enjoyed 7, and I actually finished 8.
I would probably go back to 8. I think my big issue there is just the amount of menus. There's so many menus to go through, And the draw system for the magic that's definitely an acquired taste.
Yeah.
But again, the music's great in that one. You can't go wrong with Nobuo Uematsu. He's a musical genius.
Yep. I bought 9 on the Switch when they announced it the other day and released it.
Sure.
That was the biggest disappointment game that I bought this year.
I've heard nothing but good things about 9. I own a copy, but I've still not gotten around to play it.
It's not a gripe with the game. It's not a gripe with the gameplay. It's not a gripe with a story. It's not a gripe with anything. My gripe with that, with anything as far as the game quality goes, gameplay, I should say. My gripe with it on the Switch is it's a port of the mobile version that they did for iOS. So it plays, of course it plays just like it does on the PlayStation 1. But my gripe is the characters look fantastic in high res. The backgrounds do not, because they didn't high res the backgrounds at all. And it looks,
you can't do half. It stands out like a sore thumb.
It stands out like a total sore thumb, and no matter how many times I sit down and play it, it aggravates me because that's what I pay attention to.
Sure.
And, I mean, you have these crisp, clear little 3D models of your characters running around on a blurry, brown, ugly back mat. And I don't know if maybe it's because of how they did the graphics with that game, you know, how it was almost, I don't know what you call that. I don't want to say it was hand-drawn or painted, but it's almost like it's layered on top. This, you know, the
yeah, it's still images.
Yeah,
and
still
7, 8, and 9 all did that. It's kind of like what you see in like a Resident Evil game.
And I went, man, I can't believe I paid $20 for this, and it just looks muddy and mucky. And then I got to read, and then they were like, yeah, it's a port of the mobile version. I went,
yeah.
If I'd have known that to begin with, I just would have went.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard really good things about 9 in general, especially if you're a fan of the older ones. It's really, and not to use the overused term, it's a love letter to fans of the series, from what I understand. And I've heard nothing but good things. And, you know, the music's great. And I'm sure the story's great and everything, but I feel like that's one that you should, if you're going to play it, I feel like you might as well just play the PlayStation version.
Yeah, absolutely. Just play the PlayStation version. Because it's not up-resed or anything. You're playing it exactly at 240p, what it was back then. It'll look blurry and muddy, and that's the way you want to play that game.
But it's supposed to be. It's the way it was meant to be played.
Because, man, if they don't clean it up right, if they don't clean them backgrounds up, and that's what I'm thinking, maybe they just couldn't because of the way it was. I don't know, without having to go back and completely redo the whole thing. You know, I don't know. Yeah. But to me, I was like, possible. I wished I hadn't bought it. But
I'm telling you, man, get the PlayStation version.
Yeah, well, I do. I honestly, the only thing I have for my PlayStation 1 is all the Final Fantasies and Metal Gear Solid. I think that's all that I have for PlayStation 1 left, because those are the only games I was really interested in. Sure. There's some games I would like to play, like what's the tank shooting game that was on the NES? That they just did they just did the remake or the one on the Switch version a couple years ago. The tank jumps around, you can get out of the tank, and you can get back in. Oh golly, what was
Iron
it called?
Tank?
No, crap. Now I'm going to have to look it up.
I'm drawing a blank.
Because I can't think of the name of it. I've got it all pictured in my head. And the Blaster Master. Thank you, Dexter. Yes.
Okay, yeah, you're thinking Blaster Master Blasting Again, which is not a bad game.
Yeah, I've never played that on the PlayStation 1. I never knew it was a thing until you got it. Well, actually, I saw it on a My Life in Gaming, and then you'd got it, and I went, I really want to play this game.
Yeah, I got that one for dirt cheap for like $3 when I worked at GameStop back in the day.
Yeah,
you know when they were kind of liquidating all the PlayStation 1 and N64 stock, and I really enjoyed it. And all my PlayStation games got stolen when I was 18.
Oh man,
unfortunately, yeah, and my music CDs, my whole CD wallet was just gone. But I found a copy, like a couple years ago, and I was like, all right, cool, yeah. And I just hadn't gotten a chance to delve into it too much. It's a pretty decent game for what it is, though.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not going to be as good as your 2D ones inherently, but it's still pretty legit.
Right.
I like it.
My Life in Gaming did a I don't remember. They did. I don't know if it was a Hidden Gems video or if it was if it was a here's a game that was on the NES and Super NES that they actually put on a new version of it on the PS1, and people didn't know. I don't know, but
I don't think it was advertised very well at the time. Like, I think that's, like you said, I think it's one that kind of just fell through the cracks, and a lot of people didn't even know it was a thing.
Yeah, I had no idea it was a thing until I watched it, My Life in Gaming, and then I was like, man, that looks kind of cool. And then you got it, and I'm like, well, crap, I want to play that game now.
I need to get it now, too.
Yeah, I've got to get it now, too. Daggone it. But I haven't tracked it down yet, but I don't play a lot on
I think.
Yeah, I don't play a whole lot on my PlayStation 1 anymore. I mean, I have a one. I used to have the screen with it, the little travel screen for the small one, but it burned out, the LCD part burned out. I ended up selling it because it was broken. It was like, I'm never going to get it fixed. But I don't play PlayStation 1 games very often. And if I do, I probably play the ones that I've gotten on PlayStation Plus on my Vita than I would anywhere else. But but I do have the HD Retrovision adapter for the PlayStation, and it works on the PlayStation 1, 2, and 3, so it's like I may delve back into PlayStation games someday.
It's one worth looking into. If you do a stream, I'll check it out.
Yeah, so it's all. But all I've got is Final Fantasies. I've got the entire Final Fantasy run and and Metal Gear, which I have not played Metal Gear in forever. And if I do play Metal Gear, it's probably going to be the GameCube version that I'd play over the PlayStation 1.
Right.
So, that's my poor PlayStation never gets any love. But any other games that you want to drop in this before we move on to the next?
Oh man, I'm trying to think, but nothing really comes to mind. I mean, there's games that I have nostalgia for that I still really like, even though people might say it's bad.
Yeah.
But as far as something that I played that now I'm just looking at is just not a good game, nothing else is coming to mind. There's no glaring titles that are coming to mind anyway.
Yeah. So I put out a tweet on our Twitter at Back to Bits and asked for Twitter questions, and Eric, who's on the site on the other podcast, had a couple good questions that I put in here. One of them is, what is your Holy Grail game that you hope to own someday? Well, I already own one of my Holy Grail games and I didn't even realize that it was a Holy Grail at the time. But I own Panzer Dragoon Saga, so I've got to take that one off the list. There's so many games that I ended up buying that, if Shenmue II on the Dreamcast, but I own that one. I would like to have Shining Force 1 and 2 on the Genesis, and those are relatively inexpensive games. I know Shining Force, I've never really broke down and spent the money on getting them. Do you have any Holy Grail games?
Well, as an NES collector, I definitely do. I'm going to go out there and say, first off, I don't have any delusions of ever owning a stadium events. It's not going to happen. It's out of my price range. Unless I hit the lottery and it's not enough to pay for my house and my student loans and everything else, and I just happen to have, 10 to 30 grand laying around, then maybe, sure. But as far as in the realm of possibilities, 2 for the NES are, going to be the same 2 for a lot of other people. Little Samson and Flintstones Surprise at Dinosaur Peak. I feel like it's possible for me to own both of those at some point, provided that the prices don't skyrocket higher than they've already gone. There's always that caveat. So those would be 2 that I would like to have, but it's not likely to have it's not likely to happen anytime soon.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's tons of little games that are very common or uncommon that I'd like to have, but as far as really big Holy Grail games, I'd like to have a copy of Earthbound just to have it. But if I really want to play it, I have the NES Classic. I also have a EverDrive. So if it's the EverDrive.
And you should play it, by the way. It's
I need to. I've never ever played it. I've actually got a Game Boy Advance flash card coming. So it's like, well, I may end up playing Mother and Earthbound, and because I want to try out Mother 3 on the
also
translator
a very good game
on there.
Yeah.
So. That there's, it's like, well, I'm a big Shining Force fan, but I have Shining Force 3 on the Saturn. It's the PAL version. It's not the US version. So I would like to have the US version instead of the PAL, but
Sure.
It's the same game. I would like to try to find translated patches for, because we really didn't get all the Shining Force 3 games on the Sega Saturn here.
Right, it was episodic, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was 3 of them. And you can only, but they were the other 2 only came out in Japan. So I'd like to, have those, but I'd have to get them repos of them.
Sure.
Get them translated or burn them and buy them and make ISOs of them and patch them and then burn them or whatever. But
sure,
I really don't have a holy grail game that I don't already own. I've kind of got to that point in my collection where it's like, okay, I have the big games that I really, 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 really want.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is kind of like, if I see it and it's a good price, I'll get it.
Sure.
But I've got a loose copy of the Punisher for the Genesis, so it's like, well, there's another Genesis game I really don't, cross that one off the list. I would like to have a box and a manual for it, but I'll take a loose copy. I really don't have any huge games because I lucked out years ago and got a lot of them.
And just held on to them.
Yeah, and just held on to them.
We would have known back then.
Oh, dude, if I would have known back when I was a kid, I would have never sold my Master System stuff. I had a Master System with tons of games for it, and then I had a Genesis with tons of games for it. But if I wanted to get that next system, I had to get rid of the old stuff. I traded all my Genesis stuff in for a PlayStation with all the games and everything like that, and took a handful of games that Electronic Boutique and GameStop wouldn't take, and I took them to a pawn shop and sold them. And it's like, man, I would have really liked to keep it. One of those was Budokan for the Sega Genesis. I love that stupid game. That game is terrible and it sucks, but I love that game. It was not great. It was one of those PC games that EA put on the Genesis and they didn't run 100% well, but
sure.
But I liked it, even though it was...
Well, back when EA was still making decent games.
Yeah. well, I was going to say, I'll find out tonight. I'm going to play... I bought Anthem, but I don't count that as EA. I count that as BioWare, and EA just published it.
Sure.
I won't hold that one to my EA. I'm not buying any EA games. So.
What about console? Since you can't think of any Holy Grail games, is there a Holy Grail console that you would like to fall into your lap?
I would like to have
if it was affordable.
I'd like to have an NES or an NES, not an NES. I'd like to have.
Well, shoot, I got one of those I could sell.
I'd like to have a Neo Geo. Is what I'd like to have.
That'd be nice.
There was a guy about 50 miles away here. He had posted a Neo Geo CD. It was a Model 2 version. He was wanting $300 for it. I'm just like, man, I don't have $300. And then he dropped it to $250 and said he would take a PlayStation 4 and trade for it. And I even looked to try to find a cheap PlayStation 4 on Facebook just to buy and then go, hey, I got a PlayStation 4 for you. Let's trade. And then I don't know if he ended up taking it down or ended up selling it or what. I would really like to have a Neo Geo CD or one of the, the AES systems. With the big cartridges, but man, those things are... Well, the system is expensive, but the games are even more expensive.
That's another real expensive console to collect for, yeah.
They did make a flash card for it, believe it or not. So, I mean, there is that if you want to get it. But I remember as a kid looking through GamePro magazines and hearing all about that thing, and I was like, man, I want one. And then when the price of it come out, I went, I'm never getting one. And the games back then were $100 and some. It was like insane. And I also would like to have a Jaguar. I really want a Jaguar. Even though I know the games are terrible for it, it's a sucky system, I still want a Jaguar. Just because I remember when the Dreamcast come out, walking through Babbage's, and they had Jaguars with CDs for $100. And I remember me and the guys were just walking through going, Atari Jaguars for $100, well, whatever. And now I'm like, yeah, you dummy, you should have bought one. Just bought it. And,
so you want one out of regret?
Yeah, I do. And that's what that's what it comes down to with a lot of my stuff is I want it because I remember seeing it as a kid. And I didn't get it. It's like, I don't know. Is there any systems that you don't have that you would?
Well, okay, on the same lines of, oh, well, it's not a good console. The games aren't good, but I'd like to have one. I mean, I'd like to have a CDI just for the Zelda games and Hotel Mario. I mean, just for the novelty.
Would be cool.
See, I have no desire to have a 3DO because I don't feel like it really had any games that you couldn't get on anything else that were worth anything.
Well, that's true. You know, I actually, working at Matt's, we got one traded in one time, and I had never even played one before.
I remember that.
Got it traded in, and I was cleaning it, hooked it up, and started playing, what did I play on it? I think it came with Gex. Or is that how you say Gex? Gex? That's how they say it. I mean, I don't know. They pronounce games weird sometimes. But I remember sitting there playing it going, you know what? This isn't that bad.
I'd like to have one. PlayStation and Sega Saturn.
I know. It's on Saturn and PlayStation. But, you know, it's like, and I don't think there's any games that are exclusive to the 3DO. You know, I always like the Wing Commander games, but I have it on PlayStation 1. You know, it's like, I don't know, which that's another PlayStation 1 game I have. I forgot I had that until I said it right now. I don't know. There's just some consoles, though, I'd like to have just to have them. You know, which is weird and sounds wasteful for money, but...
Well, you know. I mean, we're collectors to some degree. I mean, that's kind of what we do. You know, some things we're going to buy because, oh, man, I got to play this. I want to play this. And other things we want just to be like, look, I have this. I own this. How cool is that?
Yeah. Well, that was like the Gunnak game when I bought it. You know, it was like... I played it. I really, really liked it. It's a very cool game. But if it had been any other game, any other time, I probably never would have bought it. You know, and I ended up not hanging on to it. You know, because the wife wanted a Switch. But so I bought her a Switch.
Don't even talk to me about that.
I know, and it was just. But you know, there's lots of games over there on the wall that I have that I just have because I bought a lot of games and went, I'll keep it. Just for the heck of it, or I buy them and just go, I'll buy it just because it was cheap, you know, and then find out, oh, that was a really cool game. But I do that with systems too. I've got a Model 1 and a Model 2 Genesis and Sega CD. I don't need both of them.
But you have them.
But I have them. I use my Model 1 Sega CD more than I use my Model 2 just because I like the way it looks.
Right.
It actually doesn't play better. It probably should use the Model 2 more than I use the Model 1, but I love the way the Model 1 looks. It's just so 80s.
I like the Model 1 too. You get the tower of power.
Yeah, and the lights flashing on it, and oh man, I love it. But, you know, I have two Sega Saturns, one on the wall and one here I play. And the one that I play is a junk one that I pulled out of the trash. I don't even use the one that's in my that I got in box and, you know, everything.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I have a Super NES Junior. I never use it. I use the old Super NES.
Got one of those in a backpack in the closet.
Yeah, I mean,
I used to travel around with it when you're in the party mode and you go to somebody's house and you're drinking. And it's like, hey, I got a Super Nintendo. Man, that's a big crowd pleaser.
Oh yeah. Well, I bought the gold N64. I don't even like N64. I don't even play any games. I've literally fired that thing up twice since I got it in like 3 years. But I bought it because I'd never seen it before, and it was gold.
And I had to have it.
Yeah, I had to have it. And the price was right, and I bought it. And, you know, and it's over there on the wall with all the other systems stacked up so you could look at it, and that's what it's there for. I still have a Toaster NES, fresh in the box. Never play it because I use my top loader that's RGB modded. You know, it's but it's like... It's so hard to say, especially with the Jaguar. One came up on Facebook here the other day, which you never see. They wanted $180 for it, and I'm just like, no, I can't spend $180 on a system. Well, I can't spend $180 on a system, much less one that I'm never going to play. Of course, I did buy an Xbox One, and I literally never play it. I bought one game for it last year. I bought one game for it the year before. I bought no games for it this year. And it literally gets turned on once in a blue moon, but it's underneath my TV there because I may get a hankering to play some Forza. It's literally the only game. So I spent $200 on a system that I never play.
It happens, man.
It does. It's weird. It's a weird place to be in because, you know, I always say I could be spending it on alcohol or something else anyway. So,
that's true.
What controller have you used that is the least comfortable? And I also added to it, what is your favorite all-time controller? I know my controller that I hate the most, that I find the most uncomfortable, and that's the N64 controller.
I knew that was coming. I figured
Which I've said that a million times on this show. The other one that I really hate, but I love, is the Master System controller.
I'm gonna second that one. It's not a bad controller design.
The D-pad is horrible.
So the Master System, let's talk about it in general.
Okay.
It's technologically superior to the NES in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah.
It's two different types of games, the cartridges and the Hue card style games. But there's two fatal flaws, and they both revolve around the controller. Mm-hmm. First of all, is that there's no pause button on the controller. Right. It is on the console. Mm-hmm. Terrible design. And the other is, the D-pad. It's square, it's squishy, it's the most unprecise thing. Like, I can use it sometimes casually, but it doesn't take long before I'm like, nope, plug in the Genesis 6-button pad. Because I just cannot deal with that D-pad.
Well, does your Master System D-pad have a hole in the middle of it?
Nope, it does not. It doesn't have the hole for the screw-in joystick like the old PC controllers used to have.
Got to get one like that, because I'll put it to you this way: when I got my Master System, when I was a kid, Mom and I've probably told the story on the show before. Mom and Dad asked what system I wanted. I could get a Nintendo or get a Sega. I got a Sega. There was two little nubs in there in a bag, and I went, oh, well, this is cool. I never played the Master System controller without those little joystick nubs until I was an adult, and bought it again. And then I went, man, this D-pad controller is mush. How did I play this? And then I got to thinking, I went, wait a minute. Mine had a joystick in the middle of it. This doesn't even have a spot for it.
Yeah.
So I got to looking, and I'm like, oh, so there was two different styles of controllers. When you put that stick in there, it is so much more precise and so much better, because you're using that stick with the tip of your thumb. I'd get blisters right here on my thumb from just rolling it on that thing. And the guy that did my mod for my Game Gear, and has sent me some repo games and stuff that I'm going to be doing some stuff with on the site, Cliff's Repair, on Twitter. He 3D modeled and printed those little nubs, because you can't find them anymore. I've only seen one listing on eBay for brand new ones, and they wanted $70 for them because they were new in the bag. Oof. And he 3D prints them, and he can 3D print it, and they're I'd say they're 99% exact what they were. I don't know the build quality, with some of that 3D print stuff. But it's not factory made, so I don't expect it to be, OEM quality. But he actually makes those and can 3D print them, or if you know somebody that has a 3D printer, he can give you the printing blueprints for it to print them out yourself. But without those sticks, that controller is crap. But the reason is because Nintendo had a patent on the D-pad, and they invented it. So everybody else had to reinvent the wheel to get around it till the stupid patent expired.
You can't fault them. They got it right the first try, and they got it right great. Well, not the first try, because they had Game & Watches and stuff before that.
And that's where they perfected it.
Segmented ones, but the D-pad. Nintendo has always had the best D-pad. Take it from me, I should know.
But what's your... go ahead.
I would agree that. I think the Master System is one of the most uncomfortable ones, just simply because of the D-pad. And I don't have one of the screw hole with the added joystick option, but it's a shame, because again, the system, it's a great system. Like, I never had one as a kid. I never even saw one in person until I was an adult and I owned one. But there's a lot of really good games for it. Like, it's a quality console, but just really those fatal flaws without having the start button on the controller, and that D-pad is just, you feel like you're fighting with time. I can agree to some extent with the N64 controller, but I mean, when I got it when it was new, I loved it anyway. It was new. It was something different, Another one I really, really don't like is the Sega Saturn Model 2 controller.
I agree.
It feels like a cheap piece of crap.
And everybody loves that controller. They love it more than the Model 1 version. And I like the Model 1 version way better.
Yeah, Model 1 version all the way. That's the camp that I'm in. Because
I am too.
When I got my Saturn, it came with one of each. And I hate using that second one. It's like, oh, hey, someone's got an extra controller for... Oh, yeah. It's Model 2. I don't want that garbage.
Yeah. I end up using my... my Knights controller more than I use.
Yeah, the 3D pad is really nice.
I end up using it more than I use the Model 2. When I bought the Sega Saturn lot last year, and I bought it for my buddy because I didn't need another system. I didn't need any of the games that were with it. When I got it home and cleaned it up for him, it had a Model 1 controller in it, and I had never played with one before. I'd always played with the Model 2. Plugged the Model 1 controller in, started playing with it. I went, why have I not played with this Model 1 controller?
This thing is great.
Yeah, well, everybody told me that the Model 1 controller was terrible, and they hated it. And I'm like, no.
It's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
That Model 2 controller sucks. I mean, it's the shape is kind of wonky. The triggers, they spring too fast.
Yeah,
it's
and
like
it rattles.
You feel like you're going to snap it in half.
It
rattles
it's a cheap
like
little,
nobody
knows. I mean,
it just doesn't feel like a quality made product at all.
No, I totally agree with that. And you're the only person that agrees with me, too. I mean, everybody else I've talked to have been like, nope, that Model 2 controller is head and shoulders better than the Model 1. I will trade my Model 2 controller for a Model 1.
Yeah, absolutely. Any day.
When I gave that Saturn to my buddy, when I picked it up, if I hadn't have took a picture of it and it had a Model 1 controller with it, I would have swapped them. But I didn't. I did it fair. But
the Model 1 controller is much more comfortable. It's essentially a step up from the 6-button Genesis pad.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it really is in a lot of ways.
What's
your favorite? What's your favorite controller?
Well, my favorite right now is it's actually a tie. I can't decide which one I like better. I love the Xbox One controller. That controller is nice. It feels good. The triggers are absolutely perfect. They have the perfect little spring to them. They just feel good. They're pressure sensitive. Is just on point. It has rumble built into the trigger buttons. So like when you're playing like Forza or something like that and your tire runs over something, you can how you can feel the gas pedal under your foot sometimes, right? That's what it does on the controller. I love it. The other one that I like really well that I think is very comfortable to play with is the Switch Pro controller.
That is a pretty good controller.
Yeah, those two, I can't decide which one I like better. Whether I like my Pro controller or I like the Xbox One controller. If you'd asked me before the Xbox One, before I got an Xbox One, I would have said the 360 controller. I always liked the 360 controller.
Yeah, I really like the 360 pad as well. Again, there's one fatal flaw, though, and that is D-pad trash on it.
Yeah, the D-pad's trash on it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're using the joysticks for like shooters or anything else, or not joysticks, the analog sticks, it's great. That's a super comfortable controller. But if you have to use the D-pad for something, like if you want to plug it into your PC to use for a game on Steam or something, and you got to use the D-pad, forget about it. You may as well just use the keyboard.
Now, if you get one of the ones that had the crank D-pad, I don't know if you've ever seen those. There's actually a model that you could turn the D-pad and it will actually raise, and it works a lot better. Or you turn it and it becomes kind of more smushy. I don't know what the difference was. I don't know if it was a Pro version or what, but I specifically remember that. And you could click it up, and you're like, "Oh, that D-pad feels a lot better that way." That's kind of what the PlayStation or the Xbox One controller feels like. The D-pad's not great, but it is head and shoulders above the D-pad on the 360, and that's what I use on PC when I occasionally play PC games now. Is I use my Xbox One controller because it's Bluetooth and it just
it makes sense.
To it and it goes good. Yeah. And Dexter says he still uses his wired one for the PC. A lot of people.
Yep.
I would say 99% of the people out there use their 360 controllers for PCs.
It's a very well designed controller. There's no doubt about that. Again, other than the D-pad, I'm sorry, I don't like the D-pad on it.
Well, my biggest disappointment, especially this gen with controllers, was a PlayStation 4 controller.
Really?
When we were playing Destiny, I broke 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 4 triggers, right triggers. And I wasn't hitting it hard. Yeah, we were playing a game, and I had but we were just playing one day, and all of a sudden the trigger just stopped working. I couldn't figure out what was wrong. Took it apart and realized that there's 2 little plastic hinges on there, and one of them broke. And literally, I sent it back to Sony, went and bought another one, sent it back to Sony. By the time they got it back to me at the end of the month, I had already broke the other one that I'd bought. So I ended up having to go on eBay and buy triggers from China, and every time I would break one, hold on guys, I'll be back in 15 minutes, and take my controller apart, put the trigger in it, come back, and we'd keep on playing. It was like that all the time. And I know a lot of people didn't have that problem with them, but I mean, everybody's like, oh, you're just bear hugging the controller. No, I'm really not. I'm not doing it any different than I've ever done in the 30 years I've played games.
Yeah, I've noticed those the triggers are a little squishy. They feel like there's a marshmallow inside of it almost, where it's like there's resistance pushing, and I can tell like it feels like if you hit it just a slight bit too hard, it would just cave in.
I think what I was doing was I think I hit it just at the right angle that it would just eventually crack it. And I have a bag of them. I have a bag of triggers here, the R2 and R1. I have so many L1 triggers or L2 triggers because I always break R1 or R2. That's the one I always break.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I've never been a big fan of the 64 controller. I just never have. I've always liked the stick, but having to hold it kind of the way it just never
your
felt
hands
right.
are so close together to hold it the way it's meant to be held. And if you hold it the outside, I mean, how many games really game, like 4 maybe?
If that, yeah. But you know, a lot of people praise and love the PlayStation 2 control or the PlayStation controllers with the dual sticks right there. I don't care for that. I like mine offset because my fingers tend to hit each other because I have larger fingers. There's one controller coming out for the PlayStation 4 by Astros or something like that you can actually take the cover off of it and move the sticks around. You can change them to make them like an Xbox controller. Trouble is, that controller is $200, and I'm not paying $200 for a controller.
That's a bit steep. I mean, controllers are already so expensive these days for the new gen systems as it is, and it's $200. You can buy a console for that.
Oh yeah, I know. I was like, no, I'm not a professional gamer. I don't need a professional controller. But yeah, but
now I do like the PS2 controller quite a bit, but the problem I run into with that is with extended play, like there's a screw hole, not the screw itself, but there's a screw hole that sits right here underneath my middle finger, the way I'm holding it. And after about 45 minutes of intense playing, I start getting that blister right there. And it's like, I got to shake it out. Like, this is just because it just rubs up against the edge of that screw hole.
You know how I did away with that? I found back in the day, I found grips. They were rubber that slipped over the handles. Did away with that. I never had to worry about it again. The only problem is if you ever took them off, they had a sticky stuff on the inside that kept them on, and the hot hands would make that glue stick to the controller. So then you'd have to clean the controller all the time. But it was worth it just to not have that stupid. I know exactly where you're talking about, that curved piece of plastic where the screw hole was that just dug into your freaking hands. I didn't mention it on the show. There's a Kickstarter for a new Dreamcast controller that makes it look more like a modern Dreamcast controller that the Retro Fighter guys did, like they did with the Brawler for the N64. Is that something you're interested in? I'm personally a fan of the Dreamcast controller, and I think it's fine the way it is.
I was about to say, like, honorable mention for the Dreamcast controller, because that thing takes way more crap than it deserves. I think it's a fun controller. I like the wing design where you can kind of hold it like this. I'd say if I had to say one bad thing about it is maybe the buttons are a little small and there's a lot more room for more buttons. And the D-pad is not a good D-pad. No. It's the way the angle it is. It kind of cuts into your thumb. But otherwise, I find the Dreamcast a fun controller to use. It's just a shame that there's not more games to use it on,
Right. Well, and everybody was like, oh, when this, and it looks more like a Xbox controller, but it's a Dreamcast controller.
Sure.
And everybody's like, oh, this is great. I want it. I'm like, I'm happy.
I don't see anything wrong with the original Dreamcast.
I don't see anything wrong with it at all. A lot of people don't like the nubbiness that's on the analog stick.
Yeah.
I have figured out that if you... Well, yeah, Dexter brings up a good point. The wire on the bottom of the Dreamcast controller.
Yeah,
that's a little
and
weird.
You can only stick it there so many times before it gets on your nerves, and then it starts eating away at the plastic or the rubber around the cord.
Falling out, and
sure.
I get that.
That was a little silly.
Yeah, I'm waiting for Retrobit to bring out their wireless version, Bluetooth wireless version of it with the adapter. That's what I'm waiting for. Then I don't have to worry about that stupid cable.
Sure.
But anyway, get back to the joystick. I have found out I had bought rubber nubs for my Switch controllers in handheld mode for the Joy-Cons. Those are the exact same size as the Dreamcast analog stick, really? The top of it. So you could actually put one of those nubs on the Dreamcast controller. Man, you don't have to worry about those little hard plastic nubs anymore. It's perfect. Because I had some extra ones. I threw it on the Dreamcast controller and went, all right, this feels pretty good. But yeah, I didn't even think about putting that in the news with the Retro Fighters controller. They want like $43 to back it on Kickstarter. It's going to be
not terrible. I mean,
well, it's going to be $50 when it comes out. So sure. I've decided just to wait. There's more than enough people. Yeah, there's more than enough people that's already backed the stupid thing that they're going to make a ridiculous amount of money. And I backed them with the Brawler controller that was supposed to come out in like September, and it didn't end up coming out till like December or something. I don't remember how it worked, but it ended up being delayed 3 months because they got so many orders in that they, waited to meet demand and stuff like that. And it was just kind of like, yeah, it was cool. And then when we got it, there was an issue with the stick rubbing the trigger button, and I had to wait 3 months to get a new shell to put all the old guts in to make it. It's just like, I'll wait and see what the reviews are for it. But hopefully by then, Retrobit will have their Dreamcast wireless Bluetooth controller out, and I won't buy anything else but it anyway, because I would really like to have it wireless, because here next week my Genesis wireless controller adapter should ship, and I'm all ready for that.
All about the wireless. Lean back.
I love it. Well, I just love not having. It's bad enough sitting here and having cords strung across the floor anyway with the systems, and it's like there's just one less cord that I don't have to have strung across the floor.
Right.
But I did find a switch for my HD Retrovision cables. Here's a little tip for you guys. The HD Retrovision cables are 70 ohms. That's why they're or 75 ohms. That's why they're such a good quality cable, and they don't have any interference. The trick with finding a component switch that you can hook up, 3 or 4 of them to, is you've got to find a component switcher that does 75 ohms. And they do recommend some on their site, and one was like $15 on Amazon. Bought it, plugged it in. Looks just like it's coming through the cables straight away. And I also use HD Retrovision component cables to hook it up to the RetroTink as well. So that helps. I have all matching cables with a matching box. But definitely, if you're looking for a switch box, go on their website and find it. It's for $15. It's tremendous, and it's not powered, so I don't have another plug to plug into the outlet or anything. And now I don't have to plug and unplug things from the RetroTink, because I was really afraid I was going to end up breaking it.
It's a tiny little thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, the solder points are really, really good on it, but they do wiggle a little bit. So it's like, man, if that cable's biting on there too hard, I'm afraid to pull it off too tight and end up damaging something. And I really don't want to break it because I like it. I like it a lot.
Now, I will say, we talked about a lot of really good controllers and bad ones.
Yeah.
But I kind of go back and forth on my 100% all-time favorite.
Yeah.
So it's really hard for me to beat the classic NES controller. I know it digs into your hands. I know it's blocky, but oh my God, the buttons feel fantastic. The D-pad's great. It's just, I love it. And then, of course, the Super Nintendo is just the evolution of it, and that feels great, too.
Yeah, it does.
But also, there's a part of me that really, really loves the GameCube controller.
Yeah, I do, too.
It's so comfortable. It's ergonomic. You got, like you were talking about, the pressure-sensitive triggers on the Xbox One. You got that with the GameCube, and not a lot of people were doing that sort of thing at the time, and we finally got 2 sticks, and they were offset, and I know the buttons look like somebody shot Play-Doh on the controller and said, that'll do.
Looks like a kid's controller all the way, but
it's so comfortable to use.
Yeah,
and
it
it's
really is.
And similar to the Dreamcast controller, it's just one of those controllers that I love using, but it's just a shame that I don't have more things to use it with,
right.
Plus, I'm a big Smash player, and that's the only way to play Smash.
Yeah. Now, you got Smash for the Switch, right?
Absolutely.
Did you get the GameCube adapter for it, or?
I did not, because I had the GameCube adapter left over from Smash 4 for the Wii U, and it's the same adapter.
Gotcha.
So I still had I got the special edition for that came with the Smash Brothers controller and the adapter, so I didn't feel the need to get anything other than the game.
Yeah, then that makes sense. Yeah, I didn't realize that you'd had all that for the Wii U. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's the same thing, and you can get the aftermarket for like $20 now as well.
Yeah, and 8BitDo makes a wireless version that you can plug your controller in, or you can plug your Wii, like your NES Classic controllers and stuff in, and use it on there too. So.
And also, up until recent generations, the Wavebird was the crowning achievement of wireless controllers, and it's still a fantastic controller.
I still have the original one that I bought. I bought it day one, and I've had it ever since.
It's a great controller.
Yeah, it really is. And when I remember seeing the GameCube controller when they announced the system, and I went, "What in the crap?
What is this monstrosity?
Yeah, what is this? The buttons are all weird, and it looks really strange." But then after I got to playing with it, it was like, yeah, this controller is really great.
It feels so natural.
Yeah, it really does. It's so... Looks are very deceiving on that controller.
Absolutely. I would agree, 100%.
Because it does. It looks like a kid just drew it. That's what it looks like. It looks like it's drawn by a little kid. But it does. It feels good. And that Wavebird is really neat. I'd like to try the Power A wireless GameCube controllers for the Switch. They're Bluetooth. I would like to try one just to see how good a quality they are, if they really stack up to the quality of Nintendo's, because I don't see how they could. I just don't.
That'd be a hard order to fill.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, it really would. But I don't know anybody that got one, so I haven't tried it out yet. The only way I would get one is if they started putting GameCube games on the Switch. And even if they did, I would probably just buy one of those 8BitDo wireless ones and just use my GameCube controller on it. Was probably what I would do. So. But yeah, I mean, that one's a very close, believe it or not, that one's a very close second to one of my favorite controllers.
Like I said, it's a contender. It feels good.
Yeah, it does. Right. And I love the NES controllers. I really do. The D-pads and the buttons, you just can't beat them. 8BitDo's been the only company that has ever got it almost exactly right, and I don't know how they did it.
Sure.
But once they brought out those Bluetooth DIY kits, I was like, nope. I'm still using the original Nintendo controller, just with that Bluetooth technology in it, and it's fine.
Yep.
But it is, and coming from a guy who was a Sega fanatic, it's kind of hard to believe they say, "Oh yeah, I think the Super NES and the NES controllers are right up there," because
they're
Genesis
good controllers.
We always thought the Genesis controllers were great. I'm still not a huge fan of the D-pad of the Genesis controllers. It still feels a little wonky. It's all right, but
yeah, it could be better, but it's passable. I think the biggest issue I have is how clicky the buttons are. It's like, it's not like the NES where it's like
right. Yeah.
You can hear the press and the release, and it's like, wow, this thing sounds cheap, but it feels right. It's, I don't know.
I like to use my arcade stick a lot. With that feels more of a quality controller than the regular controllers do.
Still need to get me one of those.
I just lucked into getting 2 of them. Buying lots. That's what happens when you buy lots, and then you're like, I'll keep it. You already have one. I'll keep it. You never know when you.
What's another one, just in case this one busts? This one's it's getting kind of sticky. This one works fine. Yeah.
Yeah, but so. But yeah, so anything else? I think that
about wraps it up for this session.
Cool. What do you got going on this week? Anything to let everybody know about? On anything new or anything? Man. I don't know, the unnormal going on your Twitch channel or.
Not really. I'm sure I'll be streaming at some point this weekend, hoping to get some rest and take it easy some, but nothing major planned. What about you?
I'm getting ready to go out of town again for work, so
that's
probably
fun.
not much of nothing. I do want to play some Anthem this weekend.
Sure.
I want to get up with my buddies, my Destiny buddies, and play some Anthem. But I need to stream some stuff. But there's so many games I need to finish, and then I go and buy Anthem.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I got so many games on the back burner, and I'll start one and be like, oh, well, this is fun. I definitely want to come back to this, and I just never come back to it.
Yeah. Well, and we got our review show coming up Sunday. I think we said 9 o'clock. Now I've got to go look at my notes because I don't remember what time we agreed upon. I think it's at 9 o'clock. Let's see. Yep, 9 o'clock, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Sunday night. Me, Eric, Robert, and Nathaniel will be doing our monthly review podcast. This month's game is Tangle Deep, which is a roguelike 16-bit Japanese RPG game, which is very, very cool. It's very, very hard. But it is definitely, if you like Japanese RPGs and you like the roguelike games on top of it, it is definitely worth a look at, especially if you like those 16-bit style games. It's fantastic. That's all I'm going to say. The rest of it, you'll just have to watch the recording.
You'll have to tune in to find out.
Yeah, so we got that one, and then next month our game to review is Wargroove, which is pretty much a Advance Wars homage.
Which one is that? You said Wargroove?
Wargroove on the it's on the Switch. It's also on PC, I think, and Xbox One. I think it's coming to PS4. Cross-play, multiplayer. You can create your own battle maps.
Neat.
A lot of people have figured out how to make Advance War maps in the game, so you can download them and play.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's a very, very cool game. We had hoped that was going to be the game of this month, but they got us our review codes so late that somebody else already came in and said, we would like to fill that spot. So, okay, well, you'll be March's game then, and that's fine. That's been like the number one selling game on the Switch eShop since it came out, and it came out, first of the month. So, yeah. Pretty popular game for $15, I think is all it is. $15-20, cheap game. But if you're an Advance War fan, totally get that game. It is worth it. But don't take my word for it. Check out our review at the end of next month.
Plug.
We got to plug away. All right, guys. Well, thanks a lot for listening. Be sure to subscribe to us on Twitter, or you can follow us on Twitter at back2bits, the number 2, or at GL_podcast. Danny's at DPad Danny. I'm at JC Meadows 94. The website is www.the-gamers-lounge.com, where you can get all your news and reviews for all the latest games. And if you want to email us with any questions, I always forget to pass out our email address. It's retro@the-gamers-lounge.com. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you guys. Topics for shows.
Absolutely.
Questions you'd like us to answer on the air, or topics you'd like us to talk about on the air, we will definitely do that. But thanks a lot, guys, for hanging out with us in the chat. Dexter, it is really good to see you again. I used to work with Dexter at GameStop. I'll tell you a little story about Dexter before we go. He wanted a Dreamcast. I had 2. He had a game that I wanted on the GameCube called Fantasy Star Online Plus, or 1 and 2 Plus. I said, hey, Dexter, I will trade you this Dreamcast for your Phantasy Star game. This was when the GameCube was still out. Sure. And he was like, yeah, I will trade that. So he got my Dreamcast. I got his Phantasy Star Online 1 and 2 Plus, which is still in my collection, and worth way more than that old Dreamcast ever is.
It happens like that sometimes.
Yeah, so thanks, Dexter. I appreciate the game. I love it.
Thanks for the Fantasy Star.
Yeah, and I still play it all the time. All right, guys. Thanks a lot for hanging out with us, and we'll catch y'all next time. See ya.
Take care.